Hello, chess friends, and welcome to your out of Chess channel, and welcome back to the TCEC Season 22 Superfinal between the two top engines, Stockfish and Dragon. So yesterday we have started the analysis of our Superfinal with a beautiful and sharp tactical game played by Dragon against Stockfish in the so-called Cochran Gambit of the Russian game of the Petrov defense. And I was so glad when I saw that game because it was really, for me, sometimes too impossible to understand these openings. In my opinion, these were really dubious openings. These were openings that we should basically not studied because in my opinion they were simply impossible. But yesterday the Dragon engine and the Stockfish engine showed us that these openings are still unexplored. Chess is really unexplored. There are so many beautiful openings that still we can study, like maybe the King's Gambit, maybe some sharp lines of the Vienna game, maybe still, as we see, the Cochran Gambit is still playable because the Dragon engine managed to get a draw in this bad opening, which is really wild. And as promised, I wanted to show you now, of course, the reverse game when Stockfish had to play the Cochran Gambit, when Stockfish had to sacrifice the piece in an early stage of the game. So as I said, this is now the second game, Stockfish versus Dragon in the Cochran Gambit. So be prepared. This is really wild because I think we need really these types of games, because many times in top grandmaster level we see only Queen's Gambit decline, the Rui Lopez Italian game, I don't know, Nimzo Indian, Greenfield defenses, these solid openings that are basically hard to break. But sometimes we really need the romantic era back in chess, because you see now again we'll have a brutal Cochran Gambit. So let's check out now the game. Here Stockfish opened with the move e4, but of course these were pre-arranged moves. We have the move e5, knight to f3, knight to f6. We have the Petrov defense, the Russian game, and after move knight takes e5 we have now the normal move d6. And okay, the normal idea would be here to retreat knight to f3, and then of course knight takes e4 would be black's continuation, and probably this would be a solid drawish position for both sides. But the pre-arranged line was of course our popular Cochran Gambit with the move knight takes f7. Of course black has to react, king to f7 was still pre-arranged, and here Stockfish plays simply the move d4. Let's again repeat some theory here. If you want to of course also see the reverse game, here's the link of our analysis between the game between Dragon and Stockfish. This is now the second game that was pre-arranged. So here d4 was played by Stockfish. If you play of course bishop to c4, this is not good. We have seen it also yesterday in our analysis, because d5 will happen, probably e takes d5. You're hoping to get a discovered attack, but now with bishop to d6 black is simply paralyzing the whole position. We'll simply play rook to f8 or rook to e8, and we'll secure the king on g8, and you didn't gain anything. The king is secured. Your Cochran Gambit is simply splash, I think. So that's why after move d4 here black is continuing now many times with the move g6. What you should not do here from black's perspective is to take knight takes e4 is a suicide here, because you get simply queen to h5. You have to move your king somewhere. If you move the king to g8, then of course you get checkmated with queen to d5. You can just bring the bishop in between, but now with queen to e6 again it's checkmate. What you could do maybe is to cover yourself with the move g6, but then again with queen to d5 you lose the piece and white is much better. What you could do is maybe here to play king to e7, but then you have this stunner, queen to e2. Again the knight is pinned here, and even if you try something like d5, now you get a beautiful tactical shot with bishop to g5. You cannot take here, you cannot also cover yourself because of this pin, so that's why you lose the queen, and again the game is over for black. So this is something that you should not do many times. So black now these days, I've analyzed a little bit more now the Cochran Gambit after yesterday's game. I've analyzed now more games. Many times black is trying this idea, bishop to e7, but still we can continue here with normal ideas, knight to c3, then something like rook to e8 could be black's idea in order to escape with the king to g8. But now bishop to c4 would be a good choice, I think, because d5 as a blockade idea is not working, because you get some discoveries, bishop to d5, knight to d5, probably king to f8 would be then the continuation. Now after move kingside castling with f4 e5, white can still have some fun, can still open maybe here the f file, will include maybe even the bishop into the game. So when it comes to computer evaluations, again black is slightly better in this position, but it's I think a solid playable position for white, where white can of course create some madness. Because notice always in the Cochran Gambit there is something that we should understand, that white still has all of the 8 pawns on the board. So still we have such a good activity with the pawns, so we can always create a pawn storm here in the center of the board. So it's something I think that bothers always black in the continuation of the game. So as I said, this would be maybe sort of a line that is playable also for black. So but okay, here g6 was played by Dragon. Dragon didn't play the move bishop to e7, and here Stockfish proceeded with the normal knight to c3. We have bishop to e6. As we said also yesterday, don't play here d5, because that's the move that black is hoping for. Of course, you have a tempo against the bishop, but now you don't have any more the pawn mobility. Your breakthrough goal here is to play the move e5. That's the move that you want to play here from white's perspective with the Cochran Gambit. But notice you have to play first one move before. Bishop to d3 is very important before you play the move e5, because if you don't play bishop to d3 after d takes e5, d takes e5, the queens will be probably traded off, and that's exactly what you don't want to get from white's perspective in the Cochran Gambit. You don't want to simplify the game too much. If you simplify the game too much, then the game will probably reach the endgame stage, and black is having, of course, an extra piece on the board, and that's not good. So that's why you need to complicate things. You have to be still active with your minor pieces. You still have to keep the pieces on the board, because the only goal that you have is this pawn dynamics in the center of the board. So that's why very, very important to play first the move bishop to d3. So here bishop to g7, again Dragon is trying to escape, and now after kingside castling, again this idea rook to f8 or rook to e8, and now if black manages to get the king on g8, then it's almost like black has castled, black has secured the king, and you didn't gain anything again out of your Cochran Gambit. So that's why very important move now to break through with the move e5, because if you play two passive moves, black will get out of this mess. So it's very important not to now create at least simple threats. Simple threats of course mean that you're at least attacking something, and you force a reaction by blacks. Now after move e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, but notice black has to react. Black doesn't have time to secure the king on g8. So here knight to e4, again I'm pointing out bishop to e5. That was also in our analysis yesterday, but as we always like to say, repetition is the mother of learning. So that's why after move bishop to e5, let's see again the possible tactics. Knight to g5, the bishop is hanging, so that's why you have to cover yourself again with king to e7. But now after knight takes e6, king takes e6, queen to e2 is now a good move here for white. After move f4, the bishop could get trapped. If you try to maybe escape, then you get this one, c4, and if you try something like knight to b6, then you get even this one, c5, king to c5, then queen to a5, e5. So it's again a lost game here for black. You could maybe try here knight to f4, but it's again not even better, because again you get this idea c5, and after king to c5, again queen to e5. So this is something that I think bothers now black in the continuation of the game. So you should be careful. So as we said, after move knight to e4, here bishop to e5 is not working for black. So that's why king to g8, and it seems so that everything is compact here, that everything is protected. But now comes also I think a very important move, that you have to play knight to g5 here. So again you're creating at least some kind of a simple threat. You're not allowing here black to breathe, because now black has to make a decision. For instance, if you play something like bishop to f7, that's not good, because you get e6, so this pawn is rolling, and this is something I think also that bothers black in the continuation of the game. Notice that white always has here a 4 versus 2 pawn majority on the king side. So this is somewhere where we should attack. So this is somewhere where we should let this pawns rolling. And now after move e6, you are in serious problems, because here you have to play something like bishop to e8. But now after bishop to e4, you cannot cover this knight with the move c6. You get c4. And you see now, because you played bishop to e8, you have lost the connection of the rook and the queen, and now the knight is trapped. So again, a much better position here for white. Even if you try in this scenario bishop to d7, then again it's not good. You get bishop to g6. This is a stunning move. H takes g6, then you get queen to d5. Now the queen has lost the connection with the knight, and now you have to cover yourself or to escape with the king. But now e6, again the pawn is rolling. We have bishop to c6, but now knight to f7, we have a fork. If you take, then the queen is lost, so you have to move it now. Queen to d8, rook takes d8, knight takes d8. This is again completely winning here for white. Even if you try something like bishop to c8, then you have a new tactical shot as a possibility. Knight takes h7 is here a beautiful tactic. You have to play king to h7. Then we play this normal idea, queen to h5. You cannot take because of this activity by the bishop against the queen, against the king. You have to play king to g8, and now after bishop to g6. The only way to defend yourself here is to play rook to f4, to try to play rook to h4 and then prevent this check on h7. So now, for instance, you have to play g3, not allowing rook to h4, and now after rook to g4, still we can play this check. If king to f8 happened, then f3 simply traps the bishop. So it's really hard, of course, to see every of these moves, even if you play maybe a classical time format game. But I think it's very important to study these openings like this, because we should really be familiar with potential sidelines, because you don't want to let this game slip away from your hands, because you want to win this tactical beauty. So as I said, I wanted to really show you how tactically rich, for instance, this opening can be, and what kind of a mistake you can make, of course, from black's perspective, but of course also from white's perspective. So as we said, after move knight to g5, this bishop cannot move anywhere. That's now the most important thing to recognize. In the continuation, we have queen to c8 by dragon. We have bishop to d5. We have c6, now finally fixing the pawn structure, and now we have f4. And that's exactly how we should play the Cochran Gambit here from white's perspective. We have to use simply our pawn majority, our 4 versus 2 situation here on the king side. So here in the continuation, bishop to f5, bishop takes f5, queen to f5, and now c4. So we're not tolerating this knight in the center of the board. We want to kick it away, and now dragon plays a very interesting idea, h6, counterattack, because this doesn't make sense. If you take c takes d5, then of course black will also take the knight. You could also try maybe something like queen to b3 to deliver sort of this covered check, but here after c takes d5, queen to d5, we can still cover ourselves with queen to f7, and I don't think you gained anything. You can maybe try e6, then we can play queen to f7, and now after something like, I don't know, f takes g5, rook takes f1, king to f1, now we can develop knight to c6, rook to f8 will happen. The most important thing is here to recognize that finally white created the blockade. White is not allowing this pawn to move further, and also the b2 is a little bit vulnerable here, because white's dark square bishop is a little bit paralyzed on the square c1. So far, of course, black is holding a position. Black has an extra piece, and black will probably win the game. So that's why after move c4 and h6 here, Stockfish tried g4, again a new attack, queen to d7, we have knight to e4, and now after move knight to b6, notice that the c4 pawn is lost. That's why knight to d6, very beautiful maneuver of the knight, and now the knight is a very powerful piece, but also is connected to the c4 pawn. Really great maneuvers here by the Stockfish engine. So here knight to a6 was played by dragon. Many of us, I think, would try here to move g5, but that's something that you should not do. You have to include more pieces into the game when you're on the defensive side, and I think we can agree, although black has an extra piece, but I think black still has to defend its position. Many times you have to include simply all of your pieces into the game. It's not simply time to rush into attacks. You have to first secure the position, you have to slow down the pace of the game, and then when you have secured everything, then of course you can try some breakthroughs. So this is a beautiful example how a g5 move here immediately would cause many positional problems here for black, because white can proceed with the normal rook to e8, as we said, rook to e1, pardon me. As we said, the mobility of this pawns is something that bothers always black in the continuation of the game. Okay, you could maybe try here g takes f4, but notice now e6, the pawn is rolling. We have queen to e7, and now with knight to f5, this is already very dangerous position. So you can maybe sacrifice a piece back after g takes f5. You could maybe try even this tactic with queen to c5, sort of a check and trying to grab the piece. But now after king to h1, if you take, then this pawn is rolling further, and it's almost game over. You could maybe try to play something here, knight to d7, but here it's already with e8 to the promotion, and you have to lose the rook. So as I said, this is something what you should not do. So that's why it's very natural first to include the piece into the game. Here the dragon engine played knight to a6 and is trying also now maneuver knight to c7. From this square, of course, the knight is controlling the ex square, but also this very important e6 square. So it's a good choice here by the dragon engine. So we have bishop to e3, queen to e6, queen to e2, and now finally g5. So now this idea is working because we have activated all of our pieces. So we have here f takes g5, h takes g5, and now knight to f5. We have here rook from a to e8. If you try something like queen to e5, this is not good because you get now this one, rook to e1, and the problem is now the activity on the e file. That's something that bothers now black in the continuation of the game. For instance, if you try here queen to c7, if you try to escape with the queen from the e file attack, then of course bishop to g5 is going to happen, and now the serious strat is to move a rook to e7. Even if you compete here with the move rook to e8, this is still not good because we can even give up the queen for two rooks. So rook to e8, rook to e8, you have to play king to h7, but now with rook to e7, this bishop is lost and it's game over. So that's why, for instance, even if you try queen to e4 instead of maneuvering the queen somewhere else, then still bishop to g5 is working. Even if you try queen to c4, queen to c4, queen takes c4, now we have b3, and if you play something like knight to e5, of course knight takes g7 and king takes g7 loses here the knight on e5. So you would be forced here to play something like knight to b6, but now again you lose the battle on the 7th rank. That's now that bothers something that bothers black. Of course, even if you try to cover yourself, rook to knight to h6 is going to happen. We have here bishop to h6, rook to f7, and here after bishop to g5 we have here this perpetuals, and the game is ending with a draw. So this is a tactic, a drawish tactic that probably both of these engines were aware of. So that's why after move knight to f5, here the dragon engine, of course, with the up a piece, tried to win the game and played simply rook from a to e8, continued the pressure here around the square e5. But notice again that the dragon engine activated a new piece, like in this situation where the dragon engine played knight to a6. Again, also here in this scenario, rook to e8, first regrouping, first activating the pieces, first securing the position. It will be one particular moment time maybe to break and enter, but so far you have to protect everything. So here in the continuation we have bishop to g5, queen takes e5, queen takes e5, rook to e5, and now rook to d1. This is a beautiful move by the Stockfish engine, because if you play again too early, knight to c4, then you could lose the battle here on the 7th rank. And even if you cover maybe with rook to f7, then rook to f7, rook to f7, and now with b3, again this knight gets kicked away, knight to b6. But now look at this tactics, knight takes g7, king takes g7, and now bishop to f6 is of course winning the game. You lose the rook. We have two connected pawns here, and here with the rook activity, okay, white can get challenged maybe here a little bit on the queen side, but this is a completely winning endgame here for white. So really wild tactics. So knight to c4 is not working immediately because of the fact that you will probably lose the battle again on the 7th rank. So that's why here after move rook from a to d1, rook to f7 was played by the dragon engine, and now b3. This gives here Stockfish an extra tempo to fix now the pawn structure on the queen side. And okay, let's stop and evaluate the position. We have here two connected pawns, which are very dangerous. What Stockfish will try now is really wild. Stockfish will try to get here on the queen side sort of an extra pawn, to get here some kind of a pass pawn, and then the position could get stretched. So if we create maybe a pass pawn on the a file and then also one on the h file, then the pieces of blacks could be really stretched. You cannot really attack all of this position. So as I said, this is really wild what Stockfish will pull off now in the continuation of the game. So here knight to c5, we have bishop to e3, we have bishop to f8, rook to d8, pinning the bishop temporarily here. We have king to h7, and now rook to f3. Rook to h3 is now of course a serious threat. So here knight to e6, we have a rook to b8, very important move, attacking now the b7 weakness. Look how Stockfish attacks the position. Stockfish is really trying to win the game. This would be an immortal game, I think, if Stockfish would have won the game here in the Cochran Gambit with the white pieces. This would be, I don't know, really a story to tell everyone. So here after rook to b8, this is now the clear target, the weak b7 pawn. So we have rook to e4, attacking now now the pawn on g4. We have rook to h3, king to g6, knight to h4, again a new check. We have king to g7, now knight to f5 again, after rook to f6, now rook to f3, getting the rook on the same file where already the king is. Now after knight to rook to g4, pardon me, knight to g3 comes with a discovered check, but now you have to of course escape here somewhere on this side of the board, because if you try king to e7, then of course this is the problem. You lose again the battle around the square f7, because there's simply the pressure by both of the rooks. So after move knight to g3, we have king to g6, and now after rook to f7, king to f7, finally rook takes b7. And okay, Stockfish lost one pawn here, lost the connected pawn on the g file, but grabbed now a b pawn, and this is now really wild because also the a7 pawn is hanging, so also then the knight will be a little bit in danger. So Stockfish is creating now the position where he could maybe create two distant pass pawns. Very wild stuff here in the continuation of the game. So we have king to e8, rook takes a7, the knight is hanging, so that's why knight to d7. We have rook to a8, the new check, king to f7, and now a4. So Stockfish is just pushing the pawn further. So we have bishop to d6, king to f2, bishop to b8, and now bishop to a7. And this is really a brilliant choice here by the Stockfish engine, because for instance, if the pieces are off the board, for instance, if the bishops are off the board, this is position that I think white wants to get now, to get rid of the bishops, because now we have a distant pass pawn, as we said, on the a file. We have also distant pass pawn on the h file, and the knight always have trouble to beat this distant pass pawn, this pass pawns on the edge of the board. So the knights really don't love to fight them, because it's hard to attack them. The centralized pawns are much easier for the knight to attack. So this is a position that I think white would love to get, and then just push pawns here. If one or these two knights are attacking this side of the board, then we could also push a little bit this h pawn. So this is something that Stockfish wanted to get, so that's why this idea to play bishop to a7 was really a brilliant endgame idea here by the Stockfish engine. So bishop to f4, bishop to e3, c5, we have rook to a7, king to e8, and now a5, just pushing the pawn further. We have king to d8, knight to e4, and now bishop to e5, king to f3, attacking the rook, rook to h4, and now rook to a8, attacking the king, king to e7, and now a6, simply continue the pressure. Rook takes h2, now finally grab the pawn, which is of course good. Now there is only the pressure here on the queen side. We have a7, rook to a2, getting behind this pawn, because there is always this tactic, rook to e8, check, decoying the king, and now a potential promotion would always come with the check. So that's why you have to be careful. Rook to a2 here, a must move by the Stockfish engine. So we have here bishop to f2, knight to d4, king to g4, we have king to f7, and now bishop takes d4, c takes d4. Okay, here the dragon engine has also the pass pawn, but this is also very dangerous if these three pawns get connected somehow, maybe here on the 6th rank, maybe if we get the pawn on b6, maybe this pawn on c6, then it's probably a lost position for black, because this pawns, three connected pawns, are causing of course many positional problems now in black's position. King to f3, we have bishop to c7, knight to f2, and here after rook to h8, Stockfish is preparing in one particular moment to play maybe here a8. So that's why you have to take, but now the king has time to attack the d4 pawn, and basically black is using now many tempi just in order to protect the d4 pawn. So knight to d7, we have knight to d3, bishop to b6, we have b4, trying of course now to play the move c5, knight to f6, king to f5, rook to a1, we have king to d4. Here Stockfish gets attacked with rook to d1, but now gets the rook back on h3, and it's very important now to play this blockade, never allow this pawn to move further, because this would be then a dangerous position for white. So we have knight to g4, check, king to d6, bishop to d8, c5. So Stockfish is now pushing this pawn further, bishop to e7, king to d5, bishop to f6, now b5, knight to e3, and now king to e4, here bishop to g7, and now b6. So very dangerous. So that's why here the dragon engine realized that it's time simply to bring the rook behind these pawns. We have rook to h2, and now after move knight to c4, we have rook to a2, and here the dragon engine sacrificed simply the piece for two pawns, and has now of course this pawn, but this is still drawish position, because white can always build a blockade around the square d3. The bishop is blocked out by its own pawn, so this is now sort of a table-based drawish position. So knight to c1, rook to e6, we have king to d3, rook to e3, king to c2, we have king to g6, rook to d1, and here rook to d2, of course, protecting further the d3 square. We have king to e4, and in this position both engines agree to draw, because what we can do immediately is, of course, a trade of rooks. If you take, then we control always here the d3 square. We can always maneuver the knight wherever we want to, but always we can have a control of the d3 square, which is now very important because we're not allowing black to promote to pawn. So really wild stuff. I really enjoyed now this mini series of the Cochran Gambit. I really enjoyed that there are so many tactical possibilities, and I really enjoyed the fact that chess is not dead, that chess has still so many things to explore, that there are so many beautiful openings that are still playable, maybe in top grandmaster level. I hope there will be a brave grandmaster, maybe like Daniil Dubov, who will pull off maybe the Cochran Gambit. And there is also in the database the gameplay by the world champion Magnus Carlsen in the Cochran Gambit. I think we will cover also the game in the continuation of our mini series of the Cochran Gambit, so be prepared. This will be sort of an opening that we'll study further on my YouTube chess channel. I'm really glad that I found these two beautiful games, because as I said, it gave me really such a pleasure, and it gave me hope that there are so many things that we can see in chess, because it's very important to see them. Sometimes I'm bored, I have to say it, when I see too many Queen's Gambit decline, the Ruy Lopez games, the games we have seen millions of times, but these games are really refreshment, and I'm really looking forward to the new chess era, sort of. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see also our previous analysis of the Cochran Gambit, here's the link of the video of the game between Drag and Stockfish, so the reverse game in the sharp opening. And if you want to see more brutal games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series with some more games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.